All right, thanks for staying with us on the program. Let's dig straight into the conversations making headlines and issues in the news as we review major stories that are invoking thoughts of Nigerians nationwide. Joining us in the studio is Mazi Alphonsus Okorie, who joins us to expand these thoughts. Good morning to you, Mazi.
Good morning, my brothers.
Well, good
Thank
morning.
you.
It's wonderful
Good
to have you join
morning.
us on the program
Welcome. Thank you.
again. All right, carry on, Peter. Do that
Sure.
once.
The first issue in the news which we looked at is alternative funding. The federal government once again promising to tap into the capital markets, also to ensure private-public partnership, to ensure that the economy is thriving for most Nigerians. Is this another rhetoric like we see all the time, or owing to the body language of the government, can we say that at this point in time we can see this to be the way out of our quagmire?
Good morning, Nigeria, once again, and thank you for having me here. The first thing is the problem. Nigeria has never had a problem with policy. Ideas have never been our problem. The problem is implementation. No doubt, public partnership, government-public partnership is the best solution. But the problem is when we start this, how will it end? Is there any sincerity or purpose? At the end, it still goes back to the methodology used in carrying out these policies. So it's a good policy if it can be sincerely implemented. Now, you find out that when Nigeria goes out and coming up with any policy, it is as if it is targeting some individuals for some benefits. And when those individuals is coming in, they're coming with their mindset because it's like pay bargain. I give you this, you give me this.
Scratch my back.
At the end, Nigeria post suffers. So Nigeria has come to the level that we are very skeptical whenever government comes with new policies. Not because those policies doesn't work elsewhere, but because it has been poorly implemented in our nation. Yeah. So it is a good one, and I wish and I pray that it will be well implemented.
Now, let's hope that it is well implemented. Out of the number of sectors, that will benefit from this PPP, that's a public-private partnership, you'd find road, rail, education, health, IT, and all of that. Interestingly, power was not mentioned in all of this, and we all know how very instrumental power is to virtually every single sector of the economy across the country. However, we have also seen the degradation in terms of the power sector in the country, with complaints coming in here and there every now and then, increase in tariffs, and it's almost as if our power sector is in shambles, yet we don't see it on the list here. Do you think that perhaps the power sector in the country also needs some sort of PPP?
The whole government of power sector in Nigeria is met with all sorts of secrecy and corruption that need to be overhauled. Yeah. Going into that now, we look at privatization. By right, today, federal government should have limited access in the power, having privatized. Yeah. But it seems as if those privatization is just like normal rhetoric that everyone hears. So now we are looking at that also shows the direction of the government. Because I think now, if there are any sector that we need state of emergency, it's on power. Constant increment in tariff, constant increment in all that.
Constant great
collapse and all that is a result.
A metering gap that is also causing Nigerians to suffer.
It's a result of long-term deficiency in the management of that sector. And no matter the kind of partnership you go into, if the corporate sector is not overhauled, it's not looked into holistically, it just be normal shambles that we always see. So I think for power sector to survive for a Nigerian economy to boom the way we want, we need to sit down and define how we want to manage the power sector. because virtually power cut across every sector. In fact, this media, I know how much you will be spending every day.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
Now, think of it. If we are to have constant power, what will this media house be saving every day? Then, what other businesses? So, when, just like this morning, some of the newspapers were talking about Nigeria to suffer because of deportation and all that, Nigeria, about 20 billion foreign inflow will suffer because America give a policy. I said this also shows that, to some extent, all of us have agreed that we are not nation yet. If not, how can, yes, there are interdependent of nations, but how can one man's policy
affect the sovereignty of an entire nation?
Sovereignty of Nigeria, that all the fabrics is in fear.
Especially when it comes to funding.
Funding. At this 21st century, Nigeria is like 80% depending on foreign support, which is
foreign aids and handouts.
And when a country said that we withdraw my aids, Nigeria starts shaking.
Now, this is also the same challenge we're talking about when it comes to this joint capital market program. It's a World Bank initiative. Off the back of America's policy by Donald Trump, which is affecting funding for health, this would also affect the funding for agriculture and housing positively. Well, the major concern, like you have, which a lot of persons are wondering, people continue to say it is not bad to borrow if you're going to fund infrastructural projects. Now, this JCAP program, being a World Bank subsidiary and owing to the fact that Nigeria is still indebted to the World Bank in several millions of dollars, what's to say that its implementation would bring the much desired respite for Nigerians who are faced with a housing deficit? And we also hear that going forward, most of the major highways would have to be tolled to get money to service them, despite these initiatives coming on board.
There are one area I used to be a bit skeptical about policies in Nigeria. That is inconsistency. Now we're looking at borrowing. I'm not against borrowing, no. As an economist, I understand that there is no country that is self-sufficient that cannot borrow, no. But why you borrow matters a lot, and what you do with those borrowed funds. The reality is that Nigeria have not justified those borrowing. There have not been economic activity to justify them. Rather, can join up Nigeria to say we have been borrowing for consumption.
And not investment.
And not investments. In 2017, if I'm right, the then President Buhari government borrowed a huge sum of money to invest in rail line. And now we want to borrow more to invest in the same lane line. And about 6-7 years, nothing to show.
Except for a few projects that have been commissioned, especially the one that ran through from Nigeria to, is it Niger or I can't quite remember exactly what country.
No, what we are even talking about, I want to narrow down to the rail line.
Rail network we're talking about now.
How viable Nigeria to Abuja to Kaduna that's actually kick-started, how viable is that route? That justified the borrowing we had, the investments supposedly we invested in those things.
But it is still functional, Mazi.
It's functional, but at what capacity?
That's another angle to it.
Now, if you are looking at investments, as a businessman, you don't invest in a project that cannot sustain itself. That rail cannot sustain itself as of today. So if after 7-8 years, a project cannot sustain itself, as a businessman, you are at failure because you cannot maintain, you cannot continue borrowing money to fund the same business that you have already established. So when we look at this, I think it's also, I would have advised the government, why borrowing this? Let's tie those borrowing to specific projects and allow it to be executed. So that if today, next year we say, okay, 2025, we borrowed $1 billion and it is for power. And every Nigerian can turn on his switch and see power. I think nobody will complain.
I like the part you talked about investors. And not just to sound like this is only unique to Nigeria. A few researchers said that this JCAP initiative is across 20 countries worldwide. But more so, apart from sourcing all its funds from the World Bank, is also to encourage investors to come in. Owing to your fair knowledge of how capital markets can fund public-private partnerships, would you say that if this is largely incentivized, would have more investors in a country where our exchange rate is not stable, and also the cost and ease of doing business is a little bit on the high?
When we talk about foreign direct investment, there are many factors that determine the investment in a country. And going to World Bank, World Bank is not an investment organization. World Bank gives you loan. They can assist you with aids, but if you want to go for foreign direct investment, certainly it's not World Bank. And those individuals and organizations that will invest in your country will look at some certain factors: your exchange rates, the ease of doing business, your policy as a nation, your corruption rating, because no country will invest in a country they are not certain. So there are some factors a businessman will look at. Last year, we know how many from 2023 till now, we know how many organizations that have left Nigeria. As an investor, I'll pick up my newspaper. I will look at how many companies that left your country, and I'll go back.
For what reason?
I'll go back to check the reasons of leaving.
Yeah.
Is that a motive? The time we spend in traveling the whole world to look for investments, let's use it and try to work on ourselves. And investors will come looking for us.
But at some point, the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and his entire cabinet, went on this crusade of preaching to Nigerians that Nigerians should be patient with the policies, the change in policy and all of that the President is making, talking about the tax reform bills, this policy and that and whatnot. That yes, it might seem like these policies are back-breaking on the backs of Nigerians at the moment, but in the long run, Nigerians will eventually see the benefits of what the president is doing. And that the only thing Nigerians require at this time is patience to be able to see, that actualization. Do you think that Nigerians should continue to remain patient? And are you hopeful that some of these policies, pinpointing on the tax reform bills, will revolutionize the economy of the country?
Yeah. To be fair to the government, the tax reform bill, to me, is one of the best policy of this government. Yes.
Even to businesses, because business owners are already decrying how much will be taken out of their businesses, especially with regards to the new VAT.
Yes. On the side of the VAT, yes, every businessman, no business will by any means want any reduction. In fact, to a businessman, because every businessman is a capitalist. So anything called tax is like an enemy. But where the problem is on the implementation of the same policy. If we are to work on what we say, there are one or two things that need to be touched. But right now, I'm even confused as of the stand of the government. The government have a proposal sent to National Assembly. The governors have meeting. I met with the chairman of the tax force. The tax yes. And they come up that they have found a new ground. A common ground. So the question now is, which one is Nigeria hoping as of today, if I'm to discuss this? Is it based on the document submitted to National Assembly by the President or the agreement with the Nigeria governors? Because if we look at both sides, if we are to go with what Nigeria governors have proposed now, we will be just slightly different from what we have now.
Which is basically the same thing.
Which is basically the same thing, and it's not going to ensure development for Nigeria. That's the fact. Because in as much as we try to criticize governments, there are some things that government have done that we should be able to look at it from both sides. I say, okay, this is a good policy. And I can bet and say it's one of the best policy that this government has brought. Secondly, in the area of VAT, VAT all over the world is increasing because the demand is increasing. The problem is what Nigeria does with those VATs. What Nigeria does with those VATs.
Now, Mazi, before we move on to other discussions or other topics in the news, what are your propositions with regards to ensuring that we make Nigeria more attractive for investors, and also in our bid to attract foreign direct investment with all the meetings that we go to and all of that, the decision to join BRICS as, you know, a partner state or something like that. What do you think the Nigerian government, the federal government, the presidency of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu can do to holistically revamp our economy and make it look attractive, not just looking like gold, but make it actual gold?
Okay, to me, there are about 2 or 3 basic steps. Going into to different conferences all over the world looking for investors doesn't work. What we are going to see is what we are seeing now.
Okay.
We have meeting, we sugarcoat everything. Those that come will tell us what we want to hear. Definitely, nobody will come to your house and look at your face and tell you are smelling. But when he goes out, he will assess your dwelling and tell people how you are. And those, what they make up out of it will determine if they're going to continue with you. So Nigeria, first of all, should come back home. Today we are looking at policies that is not implemented. Last year, we were here, presided by August, and federal government bring up a policy of 50% subsidy for the university, power subsidy for the universities.
Yeah.
I think this should be about 5 months later. I don't know how many universities enjoying that. Your policy consistency is what some business.
I mean, before you carry on, a very clear example. We saw the University College Hospital in Ibadan having, you know, patients exiting their wards due to power outage there that has lingered on for a very long time.
In fact,
this is one of the many
we even say that before going to the hospital, I have to carry you past my neighbor generator so that you can have. That is not confirmed news anyway.
As funny as it might seem, it is quite disturbing to know that such a very sensitive sector of the Nigerian state is suffering due to the lack of power supply and due to the inability of the government to keep to its words of the 50% subsidy on electricity at certain universities.
And in that condition, the Minister of Power is giving Nigeria hope that even Americans and foreigners are coming on medical tourism to Nigeria.
That was the statement of the Vice President.
That is by the way. So what I'm saying in essence is, when you go and meet investors, they will admire your the business proposal you bring. Yeah. They will also look at your country home, the policy implementation, the fight against corruption, how safe is their money, what the security in your country. They look at many factors, and if those factors are not there, believe you me, you can go to the whole world, you can run around, and nobody will will come. So, so if Nigeria want to get it right, we should first, other than traveling all over the world looking for investors, sit back home, do our homework well, begin to show example on fight against corruption, which means we also begin to honor agreements with other countries and other nationals.
Yeah.
We begin to implement policies that encourage business. When we make our business environment business friendly, investors will start, because every investor is looking for a way to make gains. And if they see that your environment is good for it, why not?
Now let's talk about one state that continues to remain the case study when it comes to attracting investments, has a thriving infrastructure, and is almost like the business hub of West Africa, Lagos. News this morning is that it has also expanded its transport lines on the Red Line Rail to 9 times a day. You won't be able to expand that if you're not getting patronage and if there's no thriving commercial hub within the neighboring states. How do you think it's possible that Lagos has continued to remain this lucrative for investors, particularly when it has to do with infrastructure in terms of rail line?
Yeah, the Lagos will continue, not now, will continue to maintain that standard as other states still sit back, apart from few states that is making headway now. Before now, an average business, because what drives every development is business. Business develop a city more than government. An average non-business in Nigeria is located in Lagos. So Lagos can afford, the reality is that Lagos can be a country on its own. The IGR of Lagos is under, in fact, the reality that they ought to expand 2 times of what they are getting. Because if you look at the businesses in Lagos, it's good enough for them to do that. And again, give it to Saoru and his management team. Because one is to have those amenities, and that one is to have a management that can coordinate it. There have been a growth, a steady growth in Lagos.
Yeah.
And a plan that all the governors successively has tried to align with it. And I wish other states can emulate that. Have some, give the credit to Tinubu, it might be, but I know there are other governors that have laid some plans in Lagos. The greatest thing is that continuity in government. Now, when you come, you are not starting afresh. You are building on what your predecessor has started. So, when you look at, and again, the need of Lagos, transportation and road line becomes so important that Lagos land alone can no longer contain the population in Lagos. So automatically they have to look for alternative, which is now the rail line, which is the what they call it,
the blue for metro, the red for
and all that. So give it to Lagos. They know what is needed and they're going for it. And that is the only state that can actually attract without even going for campaigning. Attracts, because when you now see, okay, there are amenities that can support your business.
Yeah.
On average, before you start an industry in Nigeria, your first option will be Lagos. Apart from the population, you see that there are supporting factors that will support your business. So I think the successive governors in Lagos that have tried to maintain that plan deserve some kudos. And that plan, I hope, will not have
2027 is just around the corner.
Yes, whoever wins,
Yeah.
let the person, because one problem in Nigeria is that politics is not all about making life better,
What is it about?
but all about self-recognition and making their own personal money. If not, if there are a plan that you know is working, even if you are from any party, why don't you continue with it? Because it's for the interest of the people.
Now, talking about planning for Nigeria's expansion, last week there were lots of debates on if Nigeria can sustain a 67-state structure, with 31 states being contemplated for. This morning, one of the major indices in which the states are being gauged is the ability to even pay the newly agreed upon minimum wage of 70,000 naira. The Punch newspaper had earlier highlighted that 27 states in Nigeria largely rely on federal allocation to be able to meet their increasing wage bill, which has reportedly increased by 90%. In light of these indices, what do you make of states that struggle to pay the 70,000 naira minimum wage?
In fact, there are some things that will come from National Assembly. You begin to ask yourself that our representatives come from the moon. Because in Nigeria of today, to propose another state, 31 states, when we know that more than 70% of the current states can't even pay salary. Right now, we're not looking at development. What we are looking at is your ability to pay salary has become an achievement. In fact, during campaign, we have about a year in between. The first thing you'll be hearing in televisions and the campaign ground is, I pay salary. So paying salary has become an achievement in Nigeria. So on that basis, looking at that, the Nigeria House of Rep will come up with additional 31 states. I think what should be a factor in creating a state is how viable such state will be. Do you know why? Okay. It is easy for us to even propose 200 states because an average politician depends on national cake.
The FAC allocation.
So now what they are looking at now is, okay, formerly the state was getting 5 billion, now they are getting 10 billion. So let's split it. So that is why, in fact, I was even thinking that we should even reduce more states. Because the real thing is that some of these states that are not viable, though no state in Nigeria should not be, because every state have enough resources, not only to sustain them. It's difficult.
In your opinion, why are these states, the ones you claim have enough resources, not just to sustain themselves, but also to, launch forth and do wonderful things across the country, why are they not really implementing or tapping into those resources and ensuring that the state grows? We see a very sharp and wide contrast between certain states in a certain region of the country and other states in another region of the country, all in the same nation, all receiving FAC allocations. Yet some certain states do not even bother about the FAC allocation, whether it comes or not. They have an IGR that is way, way, way more than enough to sustain them.
In a country where a governor will appoint 2,000 aides, what do you expect? Now, do you know why they appoint those aides? Because when you are elected governor, you will become a king. And that king entails that everything ends with you. One of my friends once said something. He said, when you elect a poor man, and poor man in this sense is not how much you have, poor man mentally, poor man financially, he will first of all want to eat before spending. So no man will act beyond the level of his capacity. What is our recruitment method? The reality is that if you look at those that do well, read their background. I want to give you an example. Enugu State in the last dispensation was an average state. I don't think in the last dispensation anyone can grade Enugu 15/36. But today, I'm sure there are no week that Enugu is not on the headline. Capacity of the leader. Abia State. The same thing. Before now, in the past 2 or 3 regime, I'm sure Abia State is always used as one of the back states in Southeast. But today, I'm sure the same thing is not there. The capacity. So the leaders we have today, some of these leaders are those who, one, lack capacity to be even local government chairman.
Yet somehow found their way to the state government house.
In fact, there are one governor, let me not mention name.
Please
his own method of selecting commissioners is he have a slogan of "He who works, you eat." So when once you work to deliver him
now where man they work, now they chop.
Coming, and that is, if you look at those states, they cannot perform beyond above average, because their method of selecting even the commissioners. When you select commissioner, cannot look at your face and say, "Boss, this cannot work. Let's do it this way." Automatically, you get average results.
Now I know the angle I'm about to drive towards now. It's more on the basis, not legality now. We can't question the legality of it, but we might want to question the sense of it, the viability in terms of importance of such an action by a state governor who has decided as a means of empowerment to conduct mass marriages or mass weddings in a state sponsored by the taxpayers' money within that state, alongside the FARC allocation sent by the federal
54 million to be specific for dowries.
Exactly. Sent by the federal government to the state. What do you make of this?
That shows the capacity of the government and our core value. We are still living, we are in 21st century, but we are still living in a cake age. In fact, we are looking at that. I was also tied to the issue of, in this 21st century, we are still sponsoring people for pilgrimages, which is supposed to be individual, and all kind of thing. So those
state-sponsored weddings and all of that.
Last year, states in the southeast that have not paid the salaries of their indigenes approving about 500 million for Hajj. I'm not against the Islamic religion, but I'm saying, is that the priority? The Nigeria state is a secular state. Religion should be left for individuals. Coming to this wedding,
okay.
Because why they're doing those things is also to prepare ground for the coming election,
which is around the corner.
So it's like, what will I do? Okay, if I want to build electricity, people will not actually understand it. Let me go down to what they want. That is actually what is playing out. So if not, because do you know the worst problem? Last 20, I can't remember the very day, the same states spent millions, or the neighboring state cannot spend millions to wait for such wedding. Go and ask how many of those marriages is still on now. Because people now see it as a recruiting business. You can marry in the next 2-3 years, you divorce and come back again and wait for government and the government sponsorship.
Now you mentioned Hajj somewhere in Kaduna State or so, where you had also cited, yes, you're not against the Islamic religion or Hajj
or Christian pilgrimages.
Now, this is not only peculiar to Hajj. It's also peculiar. It also touches on pilgrimage to Israel, the Holy Land. Because we saw in Adamawa State, the state governor recently sponsored hundreds of persons from Adamawa to Israel for pilgrimage, for them to go and come back and add JP at the end of their names.
But is
that supposed to be a government priority at a time when states like Ebonyi State are offering scholarships to hundreds of students within the country, and about, I think, 100 or 200 for a master's program outside of the country? How do we have such a very sharp contrast between what one state governor is doing and what another state governor is doing in terms of human capital development?
It just shows our interest. You see, in some part of Nigeria, we see poverty and illiteracy as a viable tools. And for us to maintain that level, for us to maintain that demographic, that particular area, we need to keep on giving the people what they want. So the problem now lies is, do we get a leader that sees vision beyond what people see? And that is why somebody, sorry for somebody like the Emir of Kano, because he will continue to have issue with some of his people, because his thinking now is quite different from.
Are you talking about Emir Lamido Sanusi?
Yes. He will even as an emir, he will continue to have problem with them, because he's trying to introduce a different vision, ideology from what has been customary. But the truth is that for us to grow, for those states to move, there are some certain decisions that must be taken. And those decisions involves that some persons is going to feel that you are not treating them well.
Yes.
In order for you to make
now talking about treating everyone well in line with equity, it's on needs assessments. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has signed the development commission bills into law. We have more development commissions across the 6 geopolitical regions in the country, but it's coming at a time when the House of Representatives is thinking that more states will be better. Now, in fairness to regionalism and needs assessments, what would you propose as the best way to marry this yearning for equity in terms of needs assessments in the various states or across regions, as against the 2 ideologies? Should it be federalism? Should it be regionalism?
The reality is, for Nigeria to grow, if we are moving as a state, we have to go on through federalism. But Legion, when we look at the Legion government, when it's still there, I think it performed better. But the problem is that our new regional government today is not, to me, it's not regional government. In fact, we have messed up, to me, we have messed up the issue of development commissions.
Why so?
Now, every
region has one.
Now, the question is, please, let's go back. We have had this in different regions for the past years, and what have been the effects of these commissions
in terms of measuring performance?
Yes. What have been their performance? What are they going to do extra? Because right now, indirectly, the work of the ministries, the only thing we are going to see is duplications. The Ministry of Work will be trying to do work in Southeast. The Southeast Development Commission will try to also impress, and at the end, you'll be saying the same projects.
Duplication of projects.
Duplication. No. So when we now look at North, the Development Commission ought to be an intervention program that should not be a standing commission.
Not a full agency.
No.
Or a commission.
It should not be. Because when you now have it as an agency, as a commission that will last, you start spending more. But if it is an intervention, after the Civil War, there's an agreement. Not basically on having these structures.
The 3 R's program.
Yes. If you had at that time set up an intervention agency like this, yes, by now it should be wind up.
In terms of a timeline?
Yes, it should have a timeline.
Now Mazi,
because the more you continue keeping this, our budget will continue to expand, and greater large of them will be spent on bureaucracies. So when we now have, in each year, you have to budget for overhead costs, all this in 6, when we are looking at implementing other side reports of reducing cost of governance.
Yeah.
Now we are creating more. So I don't see sense. What could have happened is, like Northeast, after the effect of Boko Haram, we set up an intervention agency, handled it for so number of years. We shut it down. We know that this is intervention agency, but this, as it is now, it has become another tier of government.
One major argument that people continue to have is in relation to the NDDC, which has had its own fair share of struggles at the inception, but now has sort of stabilized, and people see it as a tool that the government has used to bring or restore peace to the Niger Delta region and also foster peace and progress in that particular region. Now, what they are clamoring for is a replication of what NDDC has done for the Niger Delta in all these other regions of the country. Talking about the Southeast Development Commission, the Southwest Development Commission. We already had the Northeast Development Commission. The Northwest Development Commission is also, so everybody wants a development commission that tallies with what the NDDC has done in the Niger Delta. Are all these commissions viable? And do you think they have the prospect to be as good and as useful as the NDDC?
The reality is that even this, as time goes on, we will start hearing all kind of news, especially on funding. Because all these commissions will have their major source of funding from the federal government.
Yeah.
And when it comes, the truth is that we are good in imitating and trying to copy. Niger Delta have a peculiar case that ordinarily, if we are to maintain true federalism, we don't need NDDC.
Why?
Because the states should be able to take care of this. Because if you measure the performance of NDDC compared to the states, you find out that some of the states are also crime marginalization.
Even within the Niger Delta region?
Yes. And if you take assessment of the distribution of their projects, you also understand. So it could have been better. Why setting up such agency?
Yeah.
we should not look focused that the primary developer of those locals is the locals themselves. Because by the time we continue to leave, NDDC now is left at who is the president, who do you appoint. At the end, you appoint those who have little or no knowledge. We have been hearing all kinds of news, billions being stolen, abandoned projects. It's still like Nigeria government. If you come, you abandon the ones. If you take assessment of the abandoned project of NDDC, I think it might be greater than what they have completed.
Certain chairmans fainting at panels.
well,
all of that.
well, in moving on to other issues, let's look at the issues in the news this morning on socio-economic implications of certain policies. This morning, the Nigerian Customs Service is receiving knocks from manufacturers and NECA over a new import levy of 4%. Now, it's also supposed to affect the Nigerian Ports Authority as well. It's off the back of a year in which even the custom duty rates changed value over 5 times last year in 2024. Now, manufacturers and NECA are complaining that this is another policy that would further impoverish Nigerians on increasing the 4% in import duty. But what do you make of this development?
Those are the problems that affect even investment in Nigeria. Because if, as of last year, the tax force came out to say Nigeria have over 60 tax going on concurrently. And that means we are still introducing more. This year, just last month, or last week, sorry, the president amended the budget of this year, basing it on the income.
Projected revenue
from custom and revenue agencies. The problem is that have we increased importation? Do we increase any other thing other than tax? Do we widen the tax net to accommodate those who are not paying? No, that will continue increasing. So those are some of the factors that affect manufacturers in Nigeria. So by the time the manufacturers in Nigeria is crying foul, looking at it, because it's to also, in fact, last year alone, just as you said, there was an increment of over 5 times. In fact, from creating of a container from 5 million up to 20 something. So at that point,
that's more than 250%.
So at that time, you find out that there are nothing you will do that the inflation will not be high. Because what we are looking at is the fact, if you ask a manufacturer to add, if you add 4%, the implication is that the manufacturer, he's crying foul because he's going to have a low turnout. Because certainly that 4% is not going to him. Let's get that.
It's going
to
the
consumers. Because the same, what you used to buy 2 naira will now go to 5 naira. Because that 4% have to be accommodated. In fact, the more you add 4%, he might add 5%. Because
which leads to low patronage.
Low patronage, high inflation, and all that.
And low import.
So that shows you, I think, why we are trying to make more money for the country. I don't understand that there would be a country before those incomes.
But my question now is, who regulates some of these increases? Because owing to reports from the comprehensive imports schedule, it was formerly at 1% last week. And then from 1% to 4%, which body is in charge of being the voice of the common man or the end users, like you say, who bear the brunt of these increases, to say, even if there has to be an increase, it can't go all the way from 1 to 4. Probably 2, 2.2 or 2.1 before getting to 4%.
The problem is that Nigeria governments act arbitrarily without consultation, and feel that whatever comes will be taken. We have organizations like Nigeria Traders Association. We are not hearing their voice. Nigeria Manufacturers Association. You see, for a policy, especially when it comes to increments, to go on smoothly, there should be enough consultation. There should be a dialogue. because all this outburst of the manufacturers also stopped foreign direct investment. Because for you to enter into a territory, we need to read or to study the behavior and how the players there, how they behave or what they feel. Because yours are not going to be different. So I will advise the Nigerian government to expand their consultation. Before implementing such policy, there should be a wider consultation. So that, because if at all we decide to add on this, and 3 of us agreed on this, there will be no cry of foul. But when because possibly my privileged position, I begin to impose, you may not have the power to stop me, or at least you will cry out. And those crying out has an implication.
True.
So I think Nigeria government should do better with consultation, knowing that they are regulating process.
Before rolling out policies, much like one of those policies I had mentioned earlier on about, that certain opposition leaders have called it anti-people policies. And this is one of many such examples that many people might describe as an anti-people policy.
Yeah, it depends on the angle they look at it, because when you use the word opposition,
Mazi, you have had opposition and now you want to jump out of your chair.
No, because the word opposition in Nigeria means many things.
Okay.
A whole lot of opposition will criticize for criticizing sake, without having alternative. Because to me, for you to have a constructive opposition, you should be able to say, okay, this is wrong, this is where it has been done better. But most of the times, people criticize for criticizing sake.
Yeah.
So I will also agree with them that this is not the best policy, because the engagement to me was poor. They should expand the consultation before implementing this.
All right, we must thank you so much, sir. It's been wonderful having you on the program. I'm afraid this is as much as we can have this conversation on the show. We'll be letting you go in just a moment. Okay. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, and a blessed year to Nigeria.
Thank you.